Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this sound. A deep, velvety saxophone riff echoing through a crowded dance floor. The rhythm is infectious, the chants unforgettable. Mama say, mama sa, mama Makossa. It's a phrase you've heard before. Maybe in Michael Jackson's Wanna Be Starting Something or Rihanna's Don't Stop the Music. But what if I told you those words and that rhythm came from a Cameroonian boy who grew up thousands of miles away from the spotlight in the bustling streets of Douala? This is the story of Manu Dibango, one of Africa's greatest musical pioneers. A man who carried the soul of Cameroon in his saxophone, who broke down barriers between jazz, funk, disco, reggae and traditional African sounds, and who became the father of global world music long before the term even existed. His journey wasn't ordinary. It was a saga that stretched across continents and generations, from the colonial churches of Cameroon to smoky jazz clubs in Paris, from revolutionary African dance halls to glittering discos of New York in the 1970s, from UNESCO peace stages to global collaboration with legends like Fela Kuti, Hebe Hancock and Yusundo. Manu Dibango's music was more than entertainment. It was a statement, a bridge connecting cultures, a rhythm that said, Africa is here and its voice will be heard. And yet behind the fame and the unforgettable hit, So Makossa, lies a story of resilience, cultural pride, constant reinvention. He wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural ambassador, a mentor, and a lion whose roar still echoes long after his passing. In this video, we will dive deep into his life, his childhood in Cameroon, his battles, his breakthrough in Europe, the global explosion of Soul Makossa, his later years as a musical elder, and the tribute that poured in when he left us in 2020. This is not just a story of one man, it's the story of Africa's sound entering the global stage and changing music forever. Welcome to the life and the legacy of Manu Dibango, the lion of African jazz. Emmanuel Njoke Dibango was born on December 12, 1933 in Douala, Cameroon. His father, Michel, was a stern man of Yabasi people, a tribe known for their deep respect for tradition and authority. His mother, a Douala woman named Dora, brought warmth and music into the family home. The Cameroon of Manu's childhood was under French colonial rule. European values, education and religion were imposed on African societies, creating a generation of young Africans who were both deeply rooted in their traditions and influenced by Western ideas. Manu's earliest memories were filled with sound, his mother's lullabies mixed with church hymns. He grew up surrounded by the Makossa rhythm, a local music style from Douala that would later define his global hit. But in his youth, it was simply the soundtrack of daily life: fishermen singing by the river, women pounding cassava to rhythms, children chapping, games in the streets. By the time Manu entered school, he already showed a love for performance. He enjoyed singing, and though shy by nature, he felt liberated when music was involved. At home, however, discipline was strict. His father insisted on academic excellence. Little did either of them know that music would become Manu's true destiny. At age 15, his parents made a bold decision. They pooled resources together, sold possessions and invested in Manu's future. He would travel to France to study. It was a difficult choice because Manu Dibango was too young to go to Europe at the time. But it was a great decision because It will alter not only his life, but the sound of global music forever. In 1949, Manu left Douala. He was just 15 years old, carrying his parents' hope and his own uncertainty. The journey by sea took weeks, and as the ship docked in Marseille, Manu stepped into an entirely different world. He traveled on to Saint-Calais, a small town in northern France, where he was enrolled at Presbyterian boarding school. Here, he encountered a Europe still recovering from World War II. Cities were scarred, families mourned, but there was also a cultural rebirth in music, art, and politics. For young Manu, however, the adjustment was brutal. He barely spoke French, struggled with cold winters, and often felt out of place among his white classmates. Loneliness became his constant companion, but in that loneliness, music became his salvation. At school, he discovered the piano. Soon after, he encountered the saxophone, an instrument that spoke to him like no other. Its deep, expressive voice allowed him to channel emotions he couldn't express in words. By the early 1950s, Manu was listening to jazz records imported from America from most of their prominent artists at the time, which were Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and Charlie Parker. He was mesmerized by their improvisation and freedom, yet he never forgot the rhythms of Cameroon. Slowly, he began to imagine a music where both worlds could meet together. Life in France was not easy. Manu faced racism, poverty, and cultural alienation, but he endured. He studied, practiced relentlessly, and began to perform in small cafes and student gatherings. For Manu, music was not just entertainment, it was survival. By the mid-1950s, Manu relocated to Belgium to pursue new opportunities. Brussels had become a hub for African students and exiles, and with them came a new wave of African music. It was here that Manu encountered the Congolese rumba movement. Rumba, with its Cuban roots and African soul, was sweeping the continent. The rhythms were infectious, the guitars melodic, and the music spoke of love, joy, and freedom. Manu joined African Bars, a Congolese band led by Joseph Kabasele, popularly known as Le Grand Calais. This was a historic moment. African jazz became one of the first Pan-African orchestra, uniting musicians from different countries and backgrounds. Manu's saxophone added a unique layer to the music, smooth, jazzy, but with African fire. With African jazz, Manu taught and recorded, learning the intricacies of rumba and absorbing its lessons. This period was transformative. It taught Manu the power of collaboration, the beauty of African unity, and the endless possibility of fusion. During these years, Manu also faced personal challenges. Money was tight, and opportunities for African musicians in Europe were limited. Yet his determination never wavered. He knew he was building something larger than himself. The 1960s were a turning point, not only for Manu Dibango, but for the entire African continent. As countries across Africa gained independence, a new spirit of freedom swept through society. Musicians became the voice of this liberation, and Manu was at the heart of the movement. Paris became the laboratory. It was a city buzzing with ideas, student protests, artists experimenting. African intellectuals debated politics in cafes. Manu played in clubs where audiences was as diverse as the music. African students longing for home, Caribbean migrants bringing calypso and reggae rhythms, French bohemians looking for new sounds. In this mix, Manu found his identity. He was neither fully European nor confined to being just an African musician. He was something new, a global artist with African roots. The saxophone became his weapon of expression. Unlike the fast, fiery style of American jazz saxophonists, Manu's sound was slower, deeper, almost conversational. It felt like he was telling a story with every note. He could play joy, sadness, rebellion, or romance all through his horn. This was also when Manu began experimenting with Makossa fusion. Makossa was the rhythm of his hometown, Douala. By blending it with jazz, improvisation, funk grooves, and big band arrangement, he created a new sound that audiences in Europe had never heard before. His shows were magnetic. Imagine the scene: smoky Paris club, the smell of Gauloises cigarettes in the air, young revolutionaries in barrettes nodding along, and Manu's saxophone cutting through the night like a call from Africa itself. By the late 1960s, Manu wasn't just a band leader, he was a symbol that African music didn't have to imitate the West. It could innovate, lead, and stand on equal ground. He was carving the foundation of what we now call world music, decades before the term even existed. Then came the moment that would change everything. In 1972, Manu recorded Soul Makossa. The story of the song is almost accidental. It began as the B-side of an anthem written for Cameroon's national football team. The A-side was meant to be the hit, but it was Soul Makossa with its hypnotic groove that stole the show. That track was unlike anything else at the time. The drums carried the Makossa beat, infectious and danceable. The bass line was funky. The saxophone lines soared. And the chants, Mama Say, Mama Sa, Mama Kossa, was irresistible. It was African, but also universal. The song traveled in an unexpected ways. A DJ in New York called David Mancuso found a copy and played it at his famous underground loft parties. From there, the track spread like wildfire across the city's dance scene. It became a staple in clubs, fueling the birth of disco culture. Soon, American radio stations were playing it, and in 1973, it entered the Billboard Hot 100. Manu Dibango, a Cameroonian saxophonist, had broken through the fortress of American pop charts, a feat no African artist had achieved at the time. But the story didn't end there. Soul Makossa became a blueprint for a global sound. Michael Jackson borrowed the refrain for one of his Starting Something in 1982. Decades later, Rihanna sampled it in Don't Stop the Music. Dozens of hip-hop and house music producers reworked its groove. The chant itself entered global culture, from nightclubs in Lagos to discos in London and block parties in Bronx. Everyone knew the refrain, even if they didn't know the man behind it. For Manu, this success was both a blessing and a burden. He was suddenly world famous, but he also had to fight for recognition of his intellectual property. His legal battle with Michael Jackson highlighted the exploitation many African artists faced when their work was borrowed without their credit. Still, Manu never grew bitter. He understood that music had a life of its own. As he once said, and I quote, "When you release a song, it no longer belongs to only you, it belongs to the world." End of quote. And the world had embraced Soul Makossa like few songs before or since. After Soul Makossa, Manu could have been content with his place in history, but his spirit was restless. He refused to be defined by a single song. Over the next 4 decades, Manu released more than 40 albums. Each record was different. One album might lean heavily into jazz fusion, another into reggae, another into salsa or funk. His curiosity was endless. He believed that music was conversation, and he wanted to speak with as many voices as possible. He collaborated with extraordinary list of artists. With Fela Kuti, he explored Afrobeat. With Herbie Hancock, he connected African rhythms with American jazz. With Yusundo, he bridged generations of African musicians. With Peter Gabriel, he contributed to world music projects that reached audiences far outside Africa. Manu also returned to Cameroon often, staying connected with his roots. He worked with younger musicians, supporting their careers and reminding them the value of their African identity. He was passionate about intellectual property rights for African artists, insisting that they be credited and compensated fairly. Beyond music, Manu became a cultural ambassador. In 2004, UNESCO named him Artist for Peace, honoring his commitment to intercultural dialogue. He performed at international festivals, often serving as Africa's representative voice. In his 70s and 80s, Manu was still touring. His concerts were joyful celebrations of life. Audiences across Europe, Africa, and America will watch in awe as this tall, charismatic man in his trademark glasses and bright African shirt filled the stage with sound. Manu's music was not about nostalgia, it was about constant evolution. He embraced electronic sound in the 1990s, experimenting with new production techniques and even collaborated with DJs. He showed that African music was not stuck in the past, it was alive, modern and global. By the 2000s, Manu Dibango was no longer just a musician, he was an institution, a legend respected by jazz purists, funk lovers, African traditionalists and pop fans alike. His name commanded reverence, and his influence could be heard everywhere, from Afrobeat to hip-hop, from world music festivals to Hollywood soundtracks. Then came March 2020. As the world locked down in fear of COVID-19 pandemic, news broke that Manu Dibango had contracted the virus. On March 24th, at the age of 86, he passed away in Paris. The grief was immediate and global. In Cameroon, his hometown of Douala went into mourning. Radio stations played his songs on loop. In France, he was remembered as a national treasure. Across Africa, fellow musicians dedicated performances to him. On social media, tributes poured in from fans who had danced to soul Makossa decades earlier and from young artists who had sampled his music without realizing how deep his influence had run. The loss not just of a musician, but of a cultural bridge, a living library of African and global music history. Manu's passing during the pandemic also carried symbolic weight. COVID-19 had silenced one of the world's greatest music voices, reminding us of the fragility of life and the urgency of celebrating our cultural heroes while they're still here. But in death, Manu remained present. His music was played in virtual concerts, his image projected in online tributes, his saxophone riff echoing through the headphones around the world as people found comfort in rhythm during uncertain times. Manu Dibango was more than a saxophonist, more than a singer. He was a bridge between worlds. From the streets of Douala in Cameroon to the concert halls of Paris and New York, his music carried the heartbeat of Africa to the global stage. With soul Makossa, he gave the world a new rhythm, one that crossed oceans, cultures, and generations. His sound became the foundation for Afro-jazz, Afrobeat, disco, and even pop, inspiring legends from Michael Jackson to Rihanna. But Manu Dibango's true legacy goes beyond any single song. He showed us that music has no borders, that the pulse of Africa could blend with jazz, funk, reggae, and soul and still remain deeply African. He was an ambassador of culture, a teacher, and a pioneer who opened doors for countless African artists to step onto the world stage with pride. Though Manu Dibango is gone, his sound continues to ripple through generations. His legacy lives in the rhythms of Cameroon, in the pulse of global dance floors, and in the soul of African music. The lion of African jazz may have left us, but his roar will echo forever. Thanks for watching, and if you like content like this, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. See you on the next. Africa, yes.